This is Sky News at 12, the headlines. Calls for a new investigation into the Qatar World Cup after fresh allegations that organisers used a dirty tricks campaign to sabotage rival bids.
It will be a very serious matter if Qatar broke the bidding rules. I think what needs to happen now is for there to be a proper independent investigation of the allegations.
2 children and their grandmother are killed by huge wildfires in Northern California as officials announce a state of emergency.
If you feel like you need to leave and nobody's told you, leave. There's a reason the hair on the back of your neck stands up sometimes.
Fears of a drought despite the rain. Water companies are summoned to Westminster and the government holds an emergency summit with farmers. And a treat for winning the Tour, Geraint Thomas joins his teammates for beers and burgers as he prepares for his victory ride into Paris today. Very good afternoon to you. A senior MP has called for a proper urgent investigation into claims that Qatar sabotaged rival bids to host the 2022 World Cup. A report in the Sunday Times alleges that Qatar paid agents to spread propaganda about the bids being made by United States and also Australia, which, if true, would contravene FIFA's guidelines. Qatar has denied the claims, but today the chair of the Digital Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee, Damien Collins, tells Sky News that they were very serious and should be investigated.
The winner to organise the 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
It was an announcement that sent shockwaves around the footballing world, promised his nation help in preparing for the tournament. Mark White, Sky News.
Bring in our political correspondent Laura Bundock now. Laura, this isn't the first time, is it, that Qatar has been accused of wrongdoing?
No, that's right. There were allegations pretty early on following that successful bid and simply say that Qatar cannot host the next World Cup.
OK, Laura, thank you. 2 children aged 4 and 5 have died in the wildfires raging through Northern California. They were killed in a house alongside their great-grandmother in the city of Redding. Well, the younger brother and sister have now been named as James and Emily Roberts. Many more people remain missing. A state of emergency has been put in place after thousands of people were forced to flee their homes in the path of the approaching flames. The car fire blazes have destroyed at least 500 structures and are threatening the communities nearby in the Shasta County. Our US correspondent Mark Austin sent this report.
The fires in Shasta County are being sucked up by strong winds to form fire tornadoes that are in Sky News in the United States.
Now, throughout his career, Geraint Thomas has been the model teammate. The loyal supporter once rode almost an entire Tour de France with a broken pelvis in order to help propel Chris Froome to victory. Well, his time in the shadows is now over. Today, he'll be crowned Tour winner on the Champs-Élysées and go into history as the first ever Welshman to achieve the feat. Well, Sky's James Matthews is in. We're on the outskirts of Paris, where Geraint Thomas will start his procession into the capital. Have to say, James, almost my favourite stage of the Tour because it's when they ride onto the Champs-Élysées, usually drinking champagne.
Yeah, that's the form, isn't it? The form is that whoever is in front on the second last day of competition, that was yesterday, will remain out in front. He will not be challenged, and he's allowed a victory procession into Paris, and that's what will happen today, possibly with champagne on the bike. Team Sky riding up for the 6th time in the last 7 years. Big one, and that's where the big celebration will be for him and for Team Sky.
OK, James, enjoy. Thank you. Well, let's take a look at some of the day's other news stories now. And ahead of Zimbabwe's election tomorrow, former leader Robert Mugabe has insisted he won't vote for his successor. The man who forced Mr Mugabe from power after almost 40 years is now taking on opposition leader Nelson Chamisa. At least 10 people have died and 40 others have been injured following a 6.4 magnitude earthquake in Indonesia. Officials say the powerful quake occurred on the island of Lombok, which sits on the so-called Pacific Ring of Fire. A spokesman for the Indonesian Disaster Mitigation Agency said the earthquake struck just before 7 o'clock local time and could be felt in the neighbouring island of Bali. A 6-year-old girl has died in hospital after she got into difficulty in the sea off Margate. Kent police say they were called out yesterday afternoon when people raised the alarm and say there are no suspicious circumstances. A Palestinian teenager who was jailed last year after being filmed kicking and slapping an Israeli soldier in the occupied West Bank has been released from prison. 17-year-old Ahad Tamimi became a heroine to Palestinians after the incident outside her home in the village of Nabi. Saleh went viral after her mother streamed it live on Facebook. People with so-called hidden disabilities, including autism and mental health conditions, will now be able to get blue parking badges under an overhaul of the system. The National Autistic Society says it will help more than 600,000 people living with autism. Sky's Phil Edwards is here with more details on this. How's it been welcomed then?
Well, campaigners are welcoming, Rebecca, what is the biggest upheaval, the biggest change, the blue badge system since it was brought in way back in 1970. This has happened after a lengthy consultation involving the views of some 6,000 disabled people. Yeah, it's been extended, as you say, by about 1 million to people who have hidden disabilities, or should we say less obvious disabilities. The Department for Transport say that these badges can transform people's lives. Those newly eligible are going to be from the following list: those who cannot make a journey without a risk of serious harm to health or safety, those who have children who are autistic, people who find car journeys very considerably stressful, and those who have difficulty walking, not just because of physical but mental factors as well. There are 2.4 million badge holders as we speak. As I say, it's going to go up by about 1 million. There are some concerns that there may not be enough disabled parking bays to go around once they've brought this in. They enable people to park indefinitely in pay and display bays and for up to 3 hours, I had no idea, on single and double yellow lines. And a recent survey has shown that 3 out of 4 people have said if they didn't have the blue badge, they wouldn't be able to get out nearly as much as they do now. And many, many more people soon are going to be able to have these badges. OK,
Phil, thank you. The Environment Secretary, Michael Gove, says he'll summon water company bosses to explain why they haven't fixed leaks in the network as the country struggles with the dry summer. It comes as farmers are due to meet government officials to warn of the heatwave's effect on the country's food supplies. Well, joining me now to discuss this in a bit more detail is Roger Faulkner, who's a Professor of Water Management at Cardiff University. Good afternoon to you. How serious, then, have things got?
Well, I think they are pretty serious, and in many respects, from the perspective of water, I think this summer's drought has been a major wake-up call. So I do think there are challenges we face, and it is quite appropriate that the Secretary of State is wanting to address some of these challenges.
Can you see why farmers are so frustrated?
Well, I can understand why farmers are frustrated. I think there have been a number of reasons as to why this has happened. I think if you just take one example, we have spent huge resources as a global community on refining the car engine, making dramatic improvements in the efficiency of the car engine. This is, to put it crudely, a very sexy topic for bright engineers and so forth. However, when it comes to improving the efficiency of water management in agriculture and irrigation schemes, this has not really improved much over the last 50 or so years. So we need to get our brightest people to work on improving the more efficient use of water on the land.
So is there an answer for farmers then? I mean, what can they do to try and, they're relying on the weather, aren't they?
Well, they are relying on the weather, but they're also relying on the resources that we hold in reservoirs and so forth. But let me give you an example. I read an article recently on Bloomberg Business about the use of vertical farming in the US. And this technique basically involves building large walls, as I see it, and then growing lettuces and so forth on the walls. This country faces massive challenges for the future, with or without Brexit. But we need to produce more food, we need to respect our farmers more, and although it won't be popular saying so, we have to pay more for the food. So the more we can produce ourselves, the better it is for this country, the more self-sufficient we are in food. Now, we can produce a lot more food by methods such as vertical farming. We use much less land. For example, they reckon in the States you can produce as much crops, 130 times more crops from the same amount of land. and you can produce 350 times, I'm reading from the article here, more produce with only 1% of the water. So in the same way we've gone to things like chicken farming, for example, we can do the same with crops. And these crops have all the qualities of existing crops, not grown on the land. Not only that, we can control the conditions in which these crops are grown, effectively like greenhouses, for example. So I think there are a lot of things we can do to produce much more crop per drop, so to speak.
OK, and what kind of impact do you think this weather is going to have on things like our Christmas dinner by the time December comes?
It will be a big problem for many of the green crops we've got at the moment, because my understanding is that the farmers have not been able to produce the crops to anywhere near the standard they've normally produced, so we will be dependent much more on other countries. This is why we have to focus our research activity in the future on more efficient farming. And we need to help the farmers. They don't have the expertise to work with state-of-the-art technology, and British universities and so forth need to work with the farmers to help deliver more crop per drop.
We've seen hosepipe bans in parts of Ireland, also I think it was in the northwest of England. Do you think we're likely to see more of those come in? Yes,
not only this year, in the future as well. And we have to plan ahead. I was involved many years ago with the Ardingham reservoir near Oxford, but the proposal never got off the ground. The idea there was to hold more water from the Thames in the winter months during floods, store it, and then use it in the summer months. For a whole host of reasons, it never got off the ground. And we have to be a little bit more flexible in the future between balancing protecting the environment and meeting the demands of society and humanity in the widest context. I'm also involved in global initiatives to develop coastal reservoirs to capture the water at the end of the estuary. These are very attractive in countries like Malaysia, China and so forth. In fact, Shanghai gets something like 30% of its water from a coastal reservoir in the Yangtze estuary. We have to start looking at these options, in my view, in the UK.
OK, Roger Faulkner, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for your expertise.
OK, thank you.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, why festivals are promising to get drastic on plastic. Welcome back. Let's get a check now on all the day's sport with Gail.
Coming up in the sport at 2:45, Bayern Munich's against Manchester City. All that and more at 2:45.
OK, Gail, thank you. 23,000 tonnes of plastic waste are produced at UK music festivals every single year, but only a third of it is actually recycled. Well, attitudes are changing, however, and organisers are promising action. More than 60 festivals have now signed a 3-year pledge to get drastic on plastic, promising to rid their sites of single-use plastics by 2021. Katie Spencer has this report.
Running a temporary village in a field can be a dirty business. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Now let's take a look at the weather.
By the springtime flowers of a mountain lake, to the first snowfall on a winter's day.
A welcome relief from the heat for some today, with plenty of wet and windy weather across England and Wales. Although this is just a short blip, with a return to warmer conditions towards the end of the week. A Met Office yellow weather warning for strong winds and heavy rain will remain in force for the southwest of England and South Wales until 3 o'clock this afternoon. Gusts of up to 50 miles an hour are possible in exposed parts, but elsewhere it will be blustery with outbreaks of rain, although western areas of both Scotland and Ireland will be drier and brighter throughout the afternoon. Much cooler than of late, with maximum temperatures just in the low 20s, which is a little below average for this time of the year. Overnight, rain will clear to leave most places dry, although a few showers are possible, particularly further west during the early hours. Temperatures are expected to creep back up as we head into next week. On Monday and Tuesday, there'll be warm sunshine, but also scattered showers, some heavy with a risk of thunder.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, more pressure on Jeremy Corbyn over claims of Labour anti-Semitism. You're watching Sky News. The top stories this hour. The chair of the Digital Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee, Damian Collins, has called for an investigation into claims that Qatar sabotaged rival bids to host the 2022 World Cup. 2 children aged 4 and 5 have died in the deadly wildfires raging through Northern California. Geraint Thomas is set to become the first ever Welshman to win the Tour de France. Now, a second senior Labour MP has been threatened with disciplinary action after a clash with Jeremy Corbyn ally over anti-Semitism. Ian Austin, a former minister and aide to Gordon Brown, has received a letter from the party accusing him of abusive conduct in Parliament. And it follows the threats of disciplinary action against veteran MP Margaret Hodge, who's admitted calling Mr Corbyn a racist and anti-Semitic. Well, here with me now in the studio is writer and broadcaster Charlie Peters, and also joining us is James Butler from the left-wing website Novara Media. Let's start with you then, shall we, James? The Labour Party just can't seem to get this right, can they?
Well, I think the Labour Party is getting it right, and it's been a slow process to get here, and that's been regrettable. It's important to remember, I think, that the NEC, the National Executive Committee, which governs the conduct of the Labour Party and how its disciplinary processes work, has not only made its code of conduct in accordance with the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, but has, listening to the criticism that has come from the Jewish community, agreed to reopen the way in which it makes those rules, and I think that's the right thing to do. I think it's important for the party to listen to these things, but I think it's also important to remember that Ian Austin is being disciplined for behaviour which is, frankly, out of place in a political party. He was screaming profanity at the chair of the party in the division lobby. That's something that should be taken seriously, and I'm glad that it is being taken seriously.
Charlie, do you agree?
Well, it's certainly true that swearing and being aggressive to someone should be out of place in a political party. But it seems clear to me that lots of things that are distasteful aren't out of place in the Labour Party. One of the key things, of course, is anti-Semitism, which is now increasingly rife amongst the members and indeed some activists and commentators. It's pretty stunning. Now, imagine if the Conservative Party, a party which has had problems with Islamophobia in the past, responded to accusations of Islamophobia by changing their definition of Islamophobia and by disciplining MPs who were upset and distressed about this. It would be outrageous. The front page of The Guardian the next day would be Tories' Day of Shame. Owen Jones would be pumping out columns about the rise of fascism, and Novara Media, I'm sure, would do lots of excellent podcasts on the topic. You know, there'd be uproar on this, but unfortunately it seems to be the case that when anti-Semitism is raised in the Labour Party, there is they rediscover their tolerance. They start to think, oh, you know, is this so bad? We need to think about freedom of speech here. We need to have a process. We need to be very gentle. You know, it's a shambles. They're terrible at dealing with this issue, and it's a shame.
OK, James, you've got veteran MPs like Margaret Hodge. She herself has personal experience, you know, of the Holocaust, memories of that. Are you saying that she should not confront Jeremy Corbyn and not tell her views?
No, absolutely. I think there is a place, and a necessary place, for strident criticism of the leadership of the Labour Party. I've been a frequent critic of it myself. I think it's important to note here that though Charlie suggests that the party hasn't adopted the definition of anti-Semitism, it has. The Code of Conduct adopts the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. It adjusts and embellishes the examples given in order to make them work within a code of conduct for a political party. That is important, and it's important not to accuse the National Executive Committee of attempting to adjust the definition of anti-Semitism, which it hasn't done. Now, where I would agree with Charlie, and where I think it is important, is to recognise that there needs to be more conversation with the Jewish community on this. And just to pick him up, I should point out that Saeed Abbasi in the Conservative Party has pointed out that Islamophobia is rife, and the Conservative Party is doing very little to nothing about it.
But, James, many people are frustrated with this new code because they haven't listed the particular examples.
Well, they have listed most of the examples. The reservations that the NEC has had about some of the examples are the same reservations that the Home Affairs Select Committee, which includes, or included at the time of that deliberation, such avid non-Corbynites as Chuka Umunna, had the same reservations about the impact that certain of those examples could have on freedom of speech.
So what do you make of this then, Charlie? Was it an oversight, or do you think it was deliberate?
Well, I think it was absolutely deliberate. They've realised that one of the examples that's given by the IHRA about remembering the Holocaust and also about how we criticise the state of Israel, I think they might have realised in the Labour Party that lots of their members are strident critics of Israel in a way which can be considered to be anti-Semitic. The reason they need to change that is because even Seamus Milne, the Director of Strategic Communications within the Labour Party, he's written a number of columns for The Guardian in the last decade about Israel, which could be considered anti-Semitic under this example in the definition of anti-Semitism that Labour don't want to adopt. So it's got to be deliberate, because they realise that if they adopt this definition, they'll be forced to remove some very senior figures in the Labour Party and remove members who they might want to keep.
James, do you think it's right that, MPs like Ian Austin, Margaret Hodge, is it right that they're now being disciplined?
Well, they're not being disciplined.
Well,
there
is
is
a
process. No, they have received what is a pro forma standard disciplinary letter that many people in the Labour Party have received over time, including those who have been involved in campaigning for Jeremy Corbyn as well. These are letters that many people I know have received over the course of the past few years. It's important that these disciplinary processes are applied equally, that they are applied to the newest member and the most senior MP alike. The conduct that Margaret Hodge admits to and that has been alleged about Ian Austin is unacceptable within a political party, and I think it's important that they be reminded of that. Now, I don't expect much to come of it other than perhaps a reprimand and a reminder that in order to make progress on this issue in a party that all of its members care about, and I believe Ian and I believe Margaret both care about the party as much as the rest of the party. In order to make that progress, we need to be able to listen to each other and treat each other with collegiality. That's important, and certainly screaming at people in the division lobby with words that I can't use on air here is just unacceptable.
Charlie, you're shaking your head through much.
Well, I mean, if I, in my workplace, called one of my colleagues an anti-Semite or a racist, I would expect some disciplinary process to be picked up. I would expect conversations to take place. But if the person I was accusing of anti-Semitism and racism had invited anti-Semitic terrorist groups to Parliament to have tea, had invited notorious anti-Semites who discuss blood libel conspiracy theorists to Parliament, I'm not convinced that I'd be the person in trouble because of that. Okay? The Labour Party leadership is full of people who have pretty repulsive views or associate themselves with people who have pretty repulsive views. And the reason why they're changing this definition is because they can't tolerate those views under the original definition.
James, your view on that?
Yeah, I don't buy this at all. The idea that anyone in the Labour Party, in the leadership of the Labour Party, who have been utterly committed to anti-racism, who have been utterly committed, and who are explicit in wanting to stamp out anti-Semitism within the party, which they have recognised, perhaps belatedly, that it is a problem that exists within the party. I do not buy.
But James, it's incredibly rare that a group of newspapers, Jewish newspapers, rally together against a leader of a party, which they have done this week.
Yeah, look, there are two things here. One is this disciplinary issue, which I accept is a separate matter. The second thing here is, look, there has obviously been a breakdown of trust between the Labour Party and many Jewish community groups. The thing that needs to happen now is a process of listening, a process of communication, and a process of dialogue, which the National Executive Committee has committed itself to doing.
OK, James Butler, Charlie Peters, thanks for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Now, it's emerged that doctors are turning away patients with eating disorders because they're not deemed to be thin enough. Campaigners have told Sky News that such an approach doesn't take into consideration the mental aspect of eating disorders and leaves many vulnerable people with nowhere else to turn. Lorna Shaddock has this report.
James Downs is a successful master's student at Cambridge University towards making those aspirations a reality. Lorna Shaddock, Sky News.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up. Time now to get a check on all the day's sport with Gail.
For life insurance that rewards healthy living, Vitality.
Time now to get a check on all the latest weather.
From the clear blue sky of a Doha morning to the fresh autumn breeze in the city of love.
A welcome relief from the heat for some today, with plenty of wet and windy weather across England and Wales, although this is just a short blip with a return to warmer conditions towards the end of the week. A Met Office yellow weather warning for strong winds and heavy rain will remain in force for southwest England and South Wales until 3 o'clock this afternoon. Gusts of up to 50 miles an hour also possible in exposed parts. Elsewhere it will be blustery with outbreaks of rain, although western areas of both Scotland and Ireland will be drier and brighter throughout the afternoon. Much cooler than of late, with maximum temperatures in the low 20s, which is a little below average for this time of the year. Overnight, rain will clear to leave most places dry, although a few showers are still possible, particularly further west during the early hours. Temperatures are expected to creep back up as we head into the weekend, and on Monday and Tuesday there'll be warm sunshine but also scattered showers, and some of those, I'm afraid to say, will be heavy with a risk of thunder.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up after the break, allegations of dirty tricks in the Qatar World Cup bidding campaign. This isn't the first time that they've been accused. There was a FIFA investigation a couple of years ago, but of course they have said and denied those allegations against them. We'll have the very latest on that and plenty more coming up after this.